I'd like to start talking about a new piece of software that we've added recently. It's called LightUp, LightUp for SketchUp. And in fact, I have the website open here somewhere. And this is a nice piece of software that plugs into SketchUp, so it operates inside the SketchUp window. It's available for Mac or PC, and the link is probably on Canvas if I remember to do that. And you can see that there's the usual sorts of things here. Under support, you'll find some short videos that are handy for learning sort of more advanced features. There's also a gallery of nice renderings. And it's only $79, so if you really like it, you can get it as a permanent plugin for your version of SketchUp. So anyway, let's talk about LightUp. First of all, when you install it, it shows up on your toolbar here. It's got a grand total of 4 buttons, which I really like. It's probably the simplest renderer that I have found. And one of the things about LightUp is it's actually designed for doing lighting calculations. So that was kind of my initial impulse to acquire LightUp. Was to replace AGI 32, which is a fairly complicated piece of lighting software. Anyway, the 4 buttons, the first one that you'll probably want to take a look at is this little cog. That's kind of the universal symbol for preferences. And the menu here, there's a simple version of the menu and a more complicated version. The simple menu is actually not too bad, but this is the full version. And a couple of things to notice. There's one number up here for resolution. Typically it's described either in millimeters or in X. So 1x is a fairly low resolution. I think that's the default actually. If you have a super complicated model with, 100 spoons in it, each one with 50,000 polygons, you're probably actually going to want to make this a little smaller. 0.1x, 0.1x would speed it up quite a lot. When you go to do final renderings, you up that number. Other settings here, by default, it's set to incremental render. Also, rendering both sides is nice for our interiors models, where sometimes you have one surface with different materials on both sides. Anyway, the last thing that you'll want to note here, by default, I believe it's set to an exterior rendering, and so you'll want to make sure it's set to an interior rendering. Now, what's cool about it, I have this model. There's no actual lighting in this model. It's a SketchUp model, so there are no lights. There's just components. And I've painted it and all that kind of stuff. All I have to do is click the Go button. It's also called the Tour tool. And what it does is fairly quickly it generates a rendered view of the model. It applies the materials that it sees. It does a kind of low resolution, so you'll see some dark shadows and things like that. However, what's nice is that you can now tour around the rendered model. It will do a little bit of regen time as I change the view, but you can see that it's actually not too bad for the fact that there's no lights in here. And there's several basic adjustments that you can do. If you click on this other button here, the capture button, there are a few basic adjustments that allow you to change the way the image looks, and these are very similar to the Revit adjustments. For example, you can change the exposure. Again, there's no real lighting in here other than some windows, so you're not really changing lighting values. You're actually just kind of changing the way it exposes the image. There's a couple other ones. Saturation, you've also seen in Revit. You can change that down to black and white. You can fiddle around with contrast, although of course as we see in most of our renderings, contrast can be very dangerous to play around with. It has a few other features, including something called bloom, and what that does, if you watch bright spots on the project, bloom makes them kind of, I don't know, soften in a way, and you can control how bloomy it is. It's just kind of a graphic effect that some people like. There's another one called depth of field, and the way that works, whoops, let me get rid of this bloom here. It doesn't show up quite as well. with bloom going. What the depth of field does is, depending on where it detects the center of the room, right here it's detecting the front desk, it can blur out things in the distance and also in the foreground. And you can change that by using this little unlock key. And when you do that, LightUp will guess where your center of vision is based on where the middle of the camera is. And there's actually a little dot that shows up. So anyway, that's a nice little feature, especially in larger spaces where you might want to blur out things in the distance. Another one is vignetting. What this does is it kind of darkens the perimeter of the screen. And the last one is gamma. This also shows up in Revit, and this is also, it's similar to exposure, except it's kind of where the white point, I think, is in the image. Anyway, if I reset it, here it is, back to what it kind of did by default, a little underexposed, if you ask me. Other things that you can do, once you've rendered it, besides wandering around the model, you can modify materials. Now, one of the things I really like about this program is it's very easy to modify materials in a fairly basic way. If I just double-click on this material here in the rendered view, it brings up the material properties. They're called shaders, and if any of you have any experience with advanced rendering programs, they typically call materials shaders. So anyway, what you can do is the shader for this flooring, you can use these things to just use some presets for different types of materials. So for example, if I choose lacquer, that's kind of a shiny material, and you can see it applies some very basic settings to this material that, you got it, make it look shiny. And you can of course change some of these. Specular is something that's probably familiar from Revit. Some other features that it uses is something called Fresnel. And Fresnel, if I check that, uncheck that option, you see how everything is fairly evenly lit? Well, in reality, when you get to a low angle, when you view a surface from a low angle, there's often kind of a darkening that happens. And in this case, you can see how it gets darker along the edge, whereas when the material gets closer to 90 degrees to the camera view, it gets more of the original color, the sort of what's called the diffuse color. And you can actually even change that color. So if you want like a night view, you might even make it a little bit darker. Okay, so it's obviously quite easy, and of course it only does whatever material you clicked on, but it does respond to the painted materials in SketchUp. So if I double click on another material, for example this other marble, I can come and make that a lacquered material as well. You see I can get more reflections from that. And there are other things like bump and specular maps. If you click these maps, you can add a bump to different materials. So for example, the plaster up here might be nice with a little bit of bump. It does make my computer slow down a little bit, so I'm gonna hold off on putting a bump map in there. In general, though, if you use a bump map, use the same kind that you use in Revit, which is to say a black and white image. And I would put the same image in for both bump and specular, and you should get pretty good results. Now, so that's the basic way that you modify the model. One thing that you can do is you can add lighting. There's one more bulb here, one more button here. It's a bulb, a light bulb. And yes, I know it doesn't really look like a light bulb does nowadays because we all use LED lights. Anyway, it's a kind of old school light bulb. And what you can do is you can place that light bulb in a project. Maybe I'll stick one. I have these decorative lights here. Maybe I'll stick one inside these decorative lights and see if I can make them light up. And the way you do that, basically you edit the component. So here's my component. And you have to make sure you get all the way inside the component for it to place it inside all of them. I'm going to hide the rest of the model so I can see behind this. And you can see that this is a semi-transparent material that I have on here. If I just click the light source tool, and it's actually called the light source query tool, I'll show you why in a second, but if I just click to place the light bulb, it's actually a ball that you can move around. It's a component, and easy enough to move. You just click on it and click the move command. The actual physical size of that ball doesn't really make a lot of difference. It's actually the the light source is emitted from a kind of I don't know, an infinite point in the center of that sphere. So the sphere itself doesn't affect the light output. However, when you use the light source query tool, if I have this selected, it pops up with information about that light source. And in fact, even if I don't have it selected and I click the light source query tool, normally if I don't click on a light bulb, it will put in a new one. But if I click on a light bulb, like magic, it pops up with information about it. And by default, the light source has a kind of a lumen value and a degrees Kelvin value. This degrees Kelvin is not like the Revit degree Kelvin, where it doesn't really show realistically, it exaggerates the warm temperature in Revit. In LightUp, 3000 is actually a fairly cool temperature. Also, you have to type in a lumen value. Usually I think it comes in with about 1200 lumens. But if I make this 3000 lumens, that's equivalent of about two 75-watt bulbs in there, which is probably plenty for this component. Anyway, so you can see that I edited multiple components, or I edited the component and it modified multiple instances. Because it's semi-transparent, you can see the components all have the light bulb in them. And now I can just hit go and see what that looks like, and hopefully that comes out okay. Oh yeah, there you go. So you can see that it kind of lights up. Now remember that it is responding to the SketchUp material properties. So in this case, that material is a semi-transparent material, so light will come through it a little bit. You can still double-click on the material and modify it somewhat. It does get a little unpredictable, so if I choose glass, for example, I might get some unpleasant shadows, I might not. It doesn't behave quite as nice as the SketchUp, the Revit glass. Anyway, other materials like here, I can make this sign, let's make it copper. Oh, very nice. Okay, so there you go. So you can see how it becomes a really easy way to kind of look at your model, make quick modifications, and then see if you like them or not in a really fully rendered view. Now, of course, Revit has its own, realistic view, but as many of you have experienced, your models can get awfully slow when you're in that realistic view. With LightUp, it stays rendered, and it stays rendered very quickly, so you can really quite easily jump from view to view and get a sense of what the rendering is going to look like. Now there is one other lighting technique, or a couple other lighting techniques. Let me go back to my front desk here, and if I click the select tool, it turns off the rendering, so it kind of unrenders it. And if I come and put a bulb, I've kind of stuck in these recessed cans here. That are, just SketchUp cans that happen to, look like recessed holes. But obviously there's no light bulb in them. They're not even a component. It's just basically a tube that I stuck in the ceiling. I can make a light bulb and put it in there. But one of the tricks is when I get its properties, instead of using just the regular omnidirectional light, I can click on these three dots and choose an IES file. Now, an IES file, you might remember from Revit, is a photometric web that actually has the light distribution pattern that is a sort of geometric representation. And as I scroll through this list here, these are all from Philips, I believe. Let's see, yeah, these are all Philips. You can actually see what it looks like. That's a graphic representation of the photometric web. And so I'm going to choose this one. I actually don't remember which one it is, but if I was a good doobie, I would go and look up online what the Philips Color Grays Power Core is, and click OK. And what you'll see, I'm just going to mouse over that. You see how I now can see the photometric web? And like Revit, you can actually force that web to be visible. And here, let's choose a different one. Oh, I don't know. Let's choose that one, just to show you the different distributions. See how that is a different shaped cone. And these lights cannot easily be modified because the output is actually fixed in the photometric web. So for example, I want to try and light this clock, which is a fairly large item, and it's fairly far away from this light source. I'm going to need a lot of output. The only way I can change that here is to change the light loss factor. I can actually change that to like 10, which is kind of faking the way that the light source operates. But anyway, that's how you can make it brighter. Anyway, the other thing that you can do, you can select it. So once you've selected the tool, if you hold down, first of all, let me select it using the query tool and not just the regular select tool. So I can select it. And you can select multiple light sources by just holding down Shift, by the way. But now if I control click, so I'm holding down the control button and clicking and dragging my mouse, it's aiming the light source. So it's now actually aiming it on that clock. And if I say copied this light fixture here, and I'm just going to use the move copy command, copy it over, whoops, except I wanted to select the bulb, not the hole. Yeah, let's just hopefully get that relatively close. Now with the query tool, whoops, let me just deselect that. With the query tool, I can select both of these, and you can see how they're both pointing the same direction. But with the query tool, when I've selected them both, I can hold down Control, and it actually focuses them both. And you can really get a good idea of where that light source is going to go. Anyway, and now I'll just click the Go button and see what happens. It's actually a little washed out. I think I have a little bit too much power on that light source. Or maybe my exposure is a little bit much. We'll see. Like any rendering program, you're going to want to balance the exposure. Of course, I'm getting a little bit of a bright spot on the ceiling, which could be a reflection, or it could be from the light source, me placing it inaccurately. But anyway, so that's how you can sort of put a spotlight on different elements. And you can see here how that's a brighter area than the rest of the space. Now, one other thing that you can do, which is kind of cool, is you can create a material that glows. Like if I wanted to have a little glow coming from the underside of this counter, maybe an LED strip, when I click the light source query tool, if I were to just click right now, it would stick a light bulb in. If I hold down the Alt button, what will happen when I click on this material is it brings up a menu that allows you to turn the material into a light source, and that's called an emitter, by the way. Emitters, this is a fairly small area, so what you do is you can change this density number. I think it's only 1 by default, but I'm going to make it 100 so that there's more kind of little mini emitters in there. And the lux is like lumens in the standard non-metric system. So it's about 100 lumens. And the spread is 90 degrees, and I'm not going to mess around with that because it makes things go a little haywire. But anyway, what you can see, I'll just quickly render this, is that it starts to glow, and it actually throws light down onto this surface. And the more you do this, the slower the model will get, although, as you can see, that was pretty darn quick. It's not a huge light output, so if I go and I look at this overall seating area, it's not going to wow you with the amount of light output, but it is giving me kind of a dim glow. It's taking the light properties of the material that I used. I did that so that I could see the lighting effect. And actually, what's really cool, if you're into the advanced settings, you can animate that material so that it changes color in an exported animation. Okay, so that is the basic kind of rendering settings in LightUp. Let's say you wanted to do an animated presentation where it's fully rendered. Well, first of all, you have to change some of the preferences here to give it a little higher quality. The 1x setting is really just for a kind of draft view. So I'm going to click 4x here to make it a higher resolution. I'm going to check this ignore cache rule button here, and that will ignore kind of any calculations it might have already done. I'm also going to uncheck incremental render. So there's 3 settings here that you'll change. Incremental render, ignore cache, and then the resolution. And what that will do is it will create a much higher quality image in LightUp land. They call that a full burn or a complete burn. And what that will do is it will render the entire model, every single corner of the model, and there'll be no regeneration time, and it'll all be at a much higher quality. So some of the splotchiness that you see will go away. So there's other things you can do, like for example, if I uncheck stroke, here, let me put it back on 1x, and because otherwise it'll take me forever to show you that. Do a quick render here. And again, this is why I like this, because I can show you some of these techniques in almost no time. One thing that some people like, some people don't, is the line work that shows up. If you don't like it, you can actually just turn it off here in this menu. Or if you do like it, you can crank it up to get a really dark line. And so, as we have seen in other renderers, the lines do tend to disappear. So if you have a lot of kind of minimal color palette, you might want to mess around with that. So, and there's plenty of other settings that are out there. Now, the last thing is when you want to go, so you've done your full burn, you hit go. It could take up to 10 minutes. Now, I know you might be thinking that is way too long. I don't want to deal with that. But actually, you know, that's pretty reasonable, and that's on a laptop. It's actually, I think, pretty nice. Anyway, the last menu here, the capture menu, that's the one that has all these adjustments. This is also where you can export the image. First of all, if you want a still image, there's a couple of presets here for the size of the still image, and of course, you know, 3840 by 2160. That's kind of related to the viewport. You can also choose larger ones, but that would give you an image that's about 17 inches wide. If I click still at this point, I can just put this. Let's put it on the desktop. That's a good spot. And you might say, when's it going to be done? It's done. It's already done. I'm going to just go to my desktop here. Oh my God, look at those weird looking kids. It's already done. That's how fast it can export a high resolution image. I should have probably turned those lines off. They look kind of dopey. And you can see, you know, it's not bad at that size. This is, again, a 3700 pixel image. I'm getting good reflections, fairly good grain. If I crank up the resolution, of course, I'm going to get even better grain or a larger image, depending on, you know, what I plan to do with it. So that's the standard flat 2D image. Let me just go back to SketchUp here. If you want a movie, you can choose in the drop-down list the size that you'd like. For us, the 1280 size is fine. 1900 by 1080 is going to look absolutely stunning on your laptop. But 1280 by 720 is fine for our projectors. There's a couple other things that you can choose here. Loop animation, I like to turn that off because otherwise it just kind of goes on and on and on endlessly. Trigger animation also means that you're going to see it on your screen as it's creating the image, the animation, so I usually leave that off. But anyway, then you just click Movie, you browse for a file location, and click Save. Now, I've already got it because it does take, you know, up to 5, maybe even 10 minutes, depending on how long the animation is, but I can show you what it looks like here. And again, this didn't take that long to produce. I used some of our ArchVision RPC people in the SketchUp model, and you can see they render quite nicely. They do kind of face you all the time, which is a little annoying. I don't know, it's something creepy about that. And of course, I'm getting some weird reflections here, which I forgot to fix. But anyway, you can see that the render quality is very decent. And the image, the animation is based on your scenes in SketchUp. So however you have those set up, that's how they're going to look. And I have virtually no lighting in this project, except for some of the decorative lights. And I also put in some wall washing and some lights on the back of the counter. So for our particular project, I'd like you to try to get the decorative lights, if you have any decorative lights, I'd like you to try to get those to light up. And you can do it either using things like a recessed can that you put into the image. Here, let me get rid of those lines. They're driving me crazy. There we go. Okay, that's more like it. You can either you can use recessed cans if you want. As you can see, you can get a fairly decent rendering without any lighting at all. But the decorative lighting, I think, adds something to it. You can also make a glowing material out of the material on your decorative lights. And that will also have almost the same effect as putting a light bulb in them. Slightly different, but almost the same. Anyway, then what I'd like you to do is, again, set up all your scenes. You might want to preview your animation. If you have forgotten how to do animations in SketchUp, they are based on scenes. And then the other thing that you'll want to check is the settings. You will want to, I like a continuous kind of motion through a space, like a walkthrough, as opposed to where it pauses. So I set my scene delay to 0, and then I'll change this transition number depending on, kind of how many scenes I've set up. And of course, just preview it before rendering it. Anyway, and then what I'd like you to do, try to get at least 30 seconds worth of animation. Depending on how you've set things up, that could be, at least 15, say 20 scenes, where you walk forward 5 or 10 feet and then you save a scene, and then you walk forward another 5 feet and save a scene. Or maybe just standing still and looking around your model. That's also an opportunity. If each of those has, say, a 5-second transition time, 5 times 20 is, what is that? That's 100. So that's well over a minute of rendered time. And some of you may spread the scenes out and make the transitions longer or less. So that is the basic settings of LightUp, and have fun with that.